Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and this is going to be episode 2 of our look through the decades of horror. This time we're on to the 1960s, and we're going to be looking at the greatest movie from every year of that decade. So the 1960s, I have talked about this decade in a video before. It's quite an overlooked decade. It's not one that immediately springs to mind as having all that many kind of groundbreaking releases, but there is a lot of quality in the 60s. So we'll look at each year of this decade and pick out the best movie from every year of the 1960s. Let's get straight to it. So starting in the first year, 1960, and we got some good releases in this year. You've got 13 Ghosts, so William Castle with his gimmick heavy releases. Atom Age Vampire, that's a pretty good one. Black Sunday, now I've not watched that one for a long time, but I know that one is a very iconic one from the 60s. Eyes Without a Face, beautiful French horror movie. Tormented, this is a really good one. This is about this woman who haunts this guy from beyond the sea. It's a real kind of like gloomy seaside set ghost story. Really good one if you can get your hands on it. And then of course we have Psycho, which is obviously a masterpiece of horror and one that changed the landscape of horror. But I'm not going to go for Psycho, I'm going for a different movie, and in this moment of doing the video, if it came down to Psycho or this movie, I think right now I'd rather watch this movie, and I do really like this one. So my pick for 1960 is going to be Hammer Horror's Brides of Dracula. Now I will say Hammer Horror have dominated this 60s list. You will see a lot of their movies in this video. And Brides of Dracula is a really underrated one. They have two very underrated vampire movies. Both will be on this list. And you know, everybody loves the Christopher Lee Dracula movies, as do I. But you should definitely give Brides of Dracula a bit of time. It's a wonderful Hammer movie, full of all that kind of rich Hammer colours and atmosphere and gothic horror, and some great vampire moments as well. This is one where there's this woman, she's travelling to Europe, she's going to be a school teacher, but she ends up getting stranded or something and stays the night in this castle with this woman. And this woman has this like guy chained to the wall, and she's like, oh, don't bother with him, he's just my brother, he's crazy. And the young woman who's travelling feels sorry for him, unchains him, but he is a vampire, and turns her into a vampire as well. So the lady of the house and Peter Cushing have to try and save her and do away with the vampire threat in the house. It's such a good movie. You should definitely check out Brides of Dracula. One of Hammer's best films, but it doesn't get mentioned all that much, and I think it gets overshadowed a bit by the Christopher Lee Draculas. But my pick for 1960 is Brides of Dracula. On to 1961, and a couple of contenders from this year. Dr. Blood's Coffin, that was a good one, filmed in Cornwall. And The Innocents, which is an amazing ghost story with Deborah Kerr. Very beautiful, lavish horror film. But the one I'm going to go for, and it's Hammer again, is Curse of the Werewolf. So Hammer's only werewolf movie, starring a young Oliver Reed, who himself is turned into a werewolf, and he has to sort of like try and live with and survive the curse of turning into this monster whenever the moon is full. Really great werewolf film. I love the makeup of Oliver Reed in this one, and he brings a really good intensity to this guy struggling with the curse. Would have liked to have had the werewolf in it a bit more. He gets some good screen time, but kind of right towards the end of the movie. But this is another one that's rife with all the wonderful Hammer tropes, as I say, the rich colours and atmosphere. And it feels a bit different as well because it is a werewolf, which, you know, Hammer didn't really explore. So my pick for 1961, Curse of the Werewolf. On to 1962. A bit more of a quieter year for me. Only one other contender in this, and that was Hammer's Night Creatures, which is a great film and has Peter Cushing in a really good bad guy role. But the movie that I've gone for is the classic Carnival of Souls, which is a fantastic, very kind of eerie, dreamlike movie from the early 60s. This young woman has a car accident that crashes into this body of water, and she works in like a church. She's a church organist or something, and goes around kind of working in this job. But on her travels, she keeps experiencing these weird visions and seeing these creepy figures following around and glaring at her and grinning at her and things like that. It's very unsettling. You don't sort of quite know what's going on. And these weird visions just keep happening throughout the whole film. It's as I say, a very kind of dreamlike mind trip movie. And it all kind of reaches the kind of climax of this film, where you kind of get the sense of where things are going. But for when this movie came out, it's a very original concept and really does kind of get your attention with all its weird imagery. So yeah, my pick for 1962 is Carnival of Souls. On to 1963, and a few good movies in this year, a few contenders. The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock's classic killer animal movie. Great movie, not one of Hitchcock's best, but definitely a contender for this year. Black Sabbath, this is another one I've not seen for a long time. I don't remember enjoying it as much as some people did. I did think it was okay. I liked, I think it's the first story with that corpse in the bed. That was really creepy. But wanted to give Black Sabbath a mention. Blood Feast, I thought I should mention this one as kind of being cited as the first gore movie. Not a good film, but certainly quite famous for that reason. Dementia 13, early Francis Ford Coppola movie. And of course The Haunting, which was nearly my pick. But I'm going to go for, again, it's a Hammer film, and it's the second of the really underrated Hammer vampire movies. And it's Kiss of the Vampire, which again, very similar to Brides of Dracula, is a Hammer vampire film that you definitely should check out. Right up there with the Christopher Lee movies in terms of quality and great kind of vampire horror. This one's a couple of honeymooners. Again, they get stranded and they get taken into this castle, offered hospitality. But this one's like a whole family of vampires, and the couple and this professor have got to try and do battle against them. So really good. Same kind of superlatives as what I would say about Brides of Dracula. But yeah, from 1963, this is a real gem of Hammer horror, and is my pick for that year. On to 1964, and a couple of good contenders for this year. Blood and Black Lace, so really good kind of giallo slasher from Mario Bava, starring Cameron Mitchell. Kwaidan, which is an interesting one. It's a Japanese anthology horror movie, which is worth checking out if you like that sort of thing. And Mask of the Red Death with Vincent Price. But the movie that I'm going to go for, again, this is like a favourite of mine, so I like my cheesy monster movies, is The Horrors of Party Beach. One that I actually watched on my recent monster movie marathon. And yeah, this is just a good one from the 60s. I've said this before, but it's kind of like a precursor to Humanoid from the Deep, in the sense of these sea monsters, although in this one they're pretty goofy looking sea monsters, but coming out of the ocean and attacking people, this time on this kind of like swinging 60s beach where they're all just dancing to this kind of typical 60s movie. So very silly, but a pretty enjoyable one. And like me, if you like your cheesy monster movies, I think this one will definitely deliver. So my pick for 1964 is The Horrors of Party Beach. On to 1965, and a few more close contenders in this year. Colour Me Blood Red, which is a really good Herschel Gordon Lewis movie, maybe my favourite one by him, of an artist that goes crazy and starts using people's blood for the colour red. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, so we're starting to see the Amicus anthologies come into things now, and Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires. But the one I'm going to go for is Repulsion. So, Roman Polanski, not a huge fan of him, although this is probably my favourite film that he's done. This is like a really kind of claustrophobic psychological thriller, and the study of a woman having a mental breakdown while sort of left alone to her own devices in this London flat. It's Catherine Deneuve, and she is starting to sort of lose her grip on her sanity and starting to see weird things and spectres around the house, some real, not so real, and it all kind of reaches a fever pitch towards the end of the movie and gets a little bit violent. But yeah, this is a really effective movie and a real kind of thrilling, albeit disturbing look of kind of mental health breakdown and these psychological struggles that this woman has. So yeah, if you want something a bit different, if you want to go into sort of the psychological horror aspects, definitely check out Repulsion. This is my pick for 1965. On to 1966, and we had a few more contenders for this year. Island of Terror, pretty good Peter Cushing movie with these really silly monsters, but it's a fun one. Plague of the Zombies, Rasputin, which is an awesome movie. I put off watching Rasputin for years and years because I just didn't think it'd be that interesting, this kind of historical Russian figure. But my word, you should absolutely check out Rasputin. It's a really good movie, a powerhouse performance by Christopher Lee, and it's actually quite funny in a number of places as well. And The Reptile. So a few Hammer horror close contenders there. And the movie that I'm going to go for is Hammer. I did say it would dominate this list. And I'm going to go for Dracula, Prince of Darkness. One of my favourite Christopher Lee Dracula movies. It has such a presence in this one. This is one where he has no dialogue. He's just kind of there, and he still owns the scenery whenever he's in this movie. This is a great example of a Hammer Dracula film. And I always love the ending to this one on the ice. I think it's a great way to end the movie. So yeah, if you're a fan of Hammer, you can't go wrong with Dracula, Prince of Darkness. So this is my pick for 1966. On to 1967, and a pretty quiet release, to be honest. Not a whole lot of movies that I thought were particularly all that amazing. Torture Garden was okay, but there's really not much else that kind of jumped out at me. The one I'm going to go for is Hammer again, and it's Quatermass and the Pit, which is a really awesome sequel from them in the Quatermass series. This time it takes place on this sort of London underground station where construction work's being carried out, and they whilst digging they stumble across this like big alien artifact, and yeah, they're trying to sort of work out what it is. And kind of the first half of the movie is more like this kind of mysterious, what is it that's been dug up kind of thing. And then the second half, they kind of get into whatever this thing is, and there's like these kind of insect-like aliens that are inside it, and it becomes much more of a creature feature. Really fun movie. I had a lot of fun watching this one, and yeah, big fan of all the Quatermass movies. So yeah, my pick for 1967 is Quatermass and the Pit. Okay, on to 1968, and we've got some heavy hitters in this year, some very close contenders. First up, we got The Green Slime, which is not one of the best movies, but I absolutely love it. It's like I think it's a Japanese movie with these green tentacled monsters in space. Kuroneko, which is a wonderful Japanese samurai ghost story. Night of the Living Dead, I obviously don't need to say anything else about that. George Romero starts the zombie genre with that one. Rosemary's Baby, which I know is a famous horror movie. I myself am not a fan of it. I don't think it's all that great a film, but I know it is a popular one from the 60s. And then Witchfinder General with Vincent Price, which still has some pretty strong violent scenes in that one. But the one I want to go for is, again, it's Hammer. Not just any Hammer. My favourite Hammer movie of all time, The Devil Rides Out, which is just an absolutely wonderful film with Christopher Lee. He's like this occult expert, and he's trying to stop this cult led by a real sinister Charles Gray. Just an absolutely wonderful British horror movie. I have talked about it a few times, so I won't go on about it. But yeah, if you just want like the ultimate kind of old-fashioned, charming but spooky British horror movie, Devil Rides Out. It's the best thing Hammer ever did. Their finest hour, and it's my pick for 1968. And then we end with 1969. Not a great year for releases, I have to say. This is probably the weakest year from the 1960s, with very little kind of jumping out at me as being a really exceptional film or candidate for the best movie of this year. The one I'm going to go for is it's simply the movie that's kind of most in my wheelhouse of what I like, and that is Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. I pretty much really enjoy all the Frankenstein movies. I love seeing Peter Cushing as the Baron. He's such a kind of an evil bad guy, but in that kind of gentleman, British gentleman kind of way. And I love how he kind of just keeps sort of evading justice, and then in the next movie he'll pop up in a different village and is still carrying out his dastardly experiments. So these are always a joy to watch, and yeah, Peter Cushing as Baron Frankenstein is awesome. So this is my pick of 1969. So that's where we're at with this decade, guys. Those are my picks. Let me know what you think of what I went for. Do you agree with my picks, or would your list look a bit different? If so, let me know. So thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned, as next episode will be going into the 1970s, which will be very interesting. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.